Why do Christians reject the Quran? The first reason we reject the Quran is simply because it is not an eyewitness account. The people who wrote it down didn't meet the angel Gabriel. Muhammad met angel Gabriel, but Abu Bakr, Zaid ibn Thabit never met angel Gabriel. It is not an eyewitness account. Number two, it is because Muhammad met a mediator, not God. Moses directly spoke with God. Jacob spoke with God. Elijah spoke with God. Isaac spoke with God. Abraham spoke with God. All these people spoke with God directly. Muhammad met a mediator. The third reason we reject the Quran is simply because it contradicts Jesus. For example, Jesus preaches salvation is free, is by faith. Muhammad preaches salvation by works. Jesus says there's no marriage, there's no sex in heaven. Muhammad says there is sex in heaven. The third reason why we reject the Quran is simply because it contradicts the Old Testament prophet. Now, for example, where are all the institutions that Moses spoke about in the Old Testament? Where is the sabbatical laws? Where are the title laws? Where are the civil and moral codes? Where are the festal seasons? For example, the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of Tabernacles. Where are all those institutions of the Old Testament? Now, the fifth reason why we reject the Quran is simply because the name of the God of the Bible is missing from it. Allah is a generic name, or Al is a generic name for the Arabian God. Now, the name of the God of the Bible is Yahweh. Where is Yahweh or Jehovah? Even in the Quran, it is not. The seven reasons why we reject the Quran is simply because the name for Jesus Christ, which is Yeshua in Arabic, is also not there. Isa is not the direct Arabic translation for Jesus. Now, the seventh reason why we reject the Quran is simply because it contradicts the biblical accounts. For example, you don't have the name of Eve in the Quran. The Bible talks about the sons of Noah, all of them being saved in the flood. The Quran says one of the sons was not saved. The Bible talks about the wife of Lot looking back and turning into a pillar of salt. The Quran simply says that he was made an example for those who disbelieve. We can go on and on and on and on. Now, the eighth reason why we reject the Quran is because it's full of mistakes. For example, it talks about the Samaritan existing at the time of Moses. That is ridiculous. It also talks about the fact that Muhammad was there when the Alaska Mosque was built. This is in Quranic history, this is false. It talks about the flatness of the earth. It talks about the stars being missiles for warding off evil spirits. We can go on and on and on and on. The ninth reason why we reject the Quran is simply because it is insufficient for faith and practice. Why? There are some things that you can only know except you appeal to the hadith. In other words, the Quran needs a hadith to make fuller meaning of certain doctrines and practices. Now, the tenth reason why we reject the Quran is simply because it deifies the Quran. It says it was not created. It makes it another uncreated being equal to God. And for these reasons, we reject the Quran. Shalom.